Hey, what's up, guys? I am back for another update on the Accurate Miniatures 1/48 scale B-25 Mitchell project. If you've been keeping up with all of that, you know that on the last episode that I got through a lot of work on filling and uh, dealing with gaps and things on the wings and getting them all together and getting the rest of the internals of the fuselage assembled, but that I got stuck or finished, left off with some uncertainty about what I was going to do regarding the nose gear, which is a real weak point with this kit, literally a weak point, because it seems like everybody ends up snapping it off as they deal with assembling the rest of the fuselage. Because, as I said before, what Accurate Miniatures wants you to do is put the nose gear in before you put the two halves of the fuselage together, which causes all kinds of hassles. So, anyway, I've got that settled, and I'm about to tell you how I did that. And without any further preamble, I'll get right into to all of that. There's a couple of things that I had to deal with that I think are just good old school, modeling challenges that I know I certainly learned a lot from, and maybe you guys will too. All right, here we go. All right, so picking back up where I left off at the end of the last video segment, where I was discussing what I was going to do about the infamously anemic nose gear on this aircraft model. Look, I probably could have built it with the one supplied in the kit without, incurring any damage if I'd been really careful. But pretty much every account you read online of somebody building this kit includes episodes of them snapping it off. And the fact is that it really was extremely weak. And, I had already broken off the support strut before I ever got it off the sprue. So, it just was jinxed from the beginning. And I decided that I would replace it, but it also had some other problems. And I'm going to attempt to show you what the major one is. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it on camera here, but if you look, okay, maybe you can see there how out of round this thing is. That's a piece of the strut, and the two halves of the mold just don't line up well, and you can maybe see it better with the parting line visible there. But the bottom line is that the part was terrible. The detail on it was pretty nice. You can see the detail around the bottom of it here is, it's really pretty good. But again, that doesn't matter if it's not going to stay together, and if you can't correct problems like a bad parting line. So, my first attempt at fixing it, though, was what I thought would be, okay, if I can pull it off, it'll be the most straightforward thing. I'll drill it out, and I'll put a rod in the inside of it. And it looks from there like I might have succeeded. I started the hole in the center, but as you can see, it didn't take long for it to pop out the side there and to go horribly wrong. So that I knew was a low probability of success, and I already actually had the white metal replacement in hand before I tried that. Now let's talk about that for a second. This was my first experience with white metal parts, and these came from a little company in Dallas called Scale Aircraft Conversions. And I got to say, just, right off the bat, that these guys, I think, have good intentions, but this part is terrible. Now, the first reason that I felt that way was because it was mangled coming right out of the box. It was, the bottom of it was bent, and so was the support strut. And I emailed them and asked them about that because I didn't know what to think. And they said, "Oh yeah, you can just bend them," and that proved to be true. They're real soft, so correcting the bend was not a problem. But I should also say that the main gear struts are also bent, or one of them is, and they're pretty thick and going to be a little more tough to straighten out. But I'm not going to bother with those because the plastic main gear struts on the kit sprue are pretty good. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. The real reason that this white metal part is just wasn't what I felt was up to the standard that I'm trying to put into the appearance of this kit was because it seems pretty clear that all they did was use one of the kit parts as a master pattern to create the mold for the white metal part. And so it has all of the same details, but not quite as crisp, which is easy to understand given that this is made in a silicon mold. And you can see that the shaft here of the strut is not very well formed because it picks up all of the same out of round issues that the one in the kit does. So I just didn't feel like that it was going to be any good, and so I decided to go old school and build one of my own, and that involved a whole series of adventures. But basically, here's what I did. I got myself some brass tubing from Sprue Brothers, which is just Albion Alloys brass tubing, and they have good selections of tubing that will slide in and out of each other if you're making something like a telescoping landing gear strut. But I wanted the actual telescoping portion to be bare metal. I wanted a real metal finish, so I used a piece of stainless for that. And so what I did is I chopped off this bottom section of the strut from the white metal part. I drilled a hole in this boss vertically right here. I put a small piece of stainless hypodermic tubing in that hole that runs up about half an inch. And then I slid the larger piece of stainless tubing over that. And then that goes inside a couple of different pieces of brass tubing that are required to sleeve it up to the 2 millimeter outside diameter that I needed for the main shaft of the strut. And that's all super glued together. And that part was all fairly straightforward. Didn't have too much issue with that. But then I started working on attaching the hydraulic damper. Just to give you a little bit of background, the way this thing works is everything below here swivels. It's basically like a caster on a shopping cart. But obviously you can't have it swiveling around and around in circles. And so it's got a limiter and a hydraulic damper on it. And that's what this cylinder right here is. And I made that out of a couple of more pieces of brass tubing that were sleeved together, and then filled it with some epoxy. But when I tried to super glue it on there, that just didn't work. Didn't work well. I also had tried to make the sleeved up section of it that it's attached to by wrapping a strip of aluminum foil around the main strut, and that also didn't work too good. So, and even with epoxy, it wasn't strong enough. So I pretty quickly came to the conclusion that I was going to have to solder it. And so I did. I'd never tried soldering anything like this before, but I have done enough soldering of, wiring and things in my day to feel like I at least had a start. And I watched some videos online about soldering this type of stuff. And I got myself a Dremel butane soldering iron, which is a pretty cool little gizmo. And basically jigged it up and was able to, solder. It took me a couple of tries, but I got everything soldered together, and then added a few more details. The actuator arm and the linkage for the damper are just bits of polystyrene. The other little cylinder over here is just a piece of lead wire. And then this is the this thing right here that's sticking out is basically just what pushes up against the gear door as it's retracting. And that's just a little strip of brass that's soldered on there at a right angle. And I used some thicker aluminum foil to make a single wrap of the band around there, and then that's super glued on. And then the stabilizing or the linkage arm here is just the white metal one from those guys. So, and that's all super glued in here and ready for some primer and some silver paint. So there it is. I'm telling you guys all this because if you ever find yourself in this situation, hey, it wasn't the easiest thing that I've ever done to fabricate this little landing gear, but I definitely learned a lot doing it, and it's something that I would feel confident tackling again with the skills that I picked up just by bailing into it and giving it a whirl. And I feel really good about the way it turned out. I think that the details look good, and hey, this thing is strong enough that if it weren't, for some of these small bits that are attached on here, you could you could pretty much swing this model airplane around by the nose gear and not worry about it coming off. So I definitely solved the strength problem, and I feel like I bought myself some good detail in the process. I also I've also got the nose wheel from Def Model fitted. I had to open up this hole quite a bit to get it to slide over the axle here, but that wasn't too big of a deal. A little bit annoying, but hey, it is what it is. It's all ready to go, and time for some paint. So here I am a couple of days after completing the landing gear project, or the nose gear project, and what I'm thinking the most right now is how much model making is like a roller coaster. One day you're on top of the world because you've just pulled off something difficult that you've never done before, and it turned out pretty cool, and you're stoked about it. And the very next day you are right back down in the dumps because your model airplane kit is not going according to plan or cooperating in some way. And that's exactly the case with this silly B-25. And I'm going to do a quick drive-by to show you exactly what's going on before I wade into the work that's in front of me on the fuselage. So I'm going to change the camera position. Okay, so fuselage is glued together, and from a distance everything looks pretty good, but let's look a little closer. Okay, so you can see from that doesn't look too bad. You can see that I've already put some stretched sprue in there to take care of a very small gap that I had. And, nothing, no major drama there, but let's move along down the length a little bit. Okay, now things are starting to look a little less copacetic. You can see at the back of the access hatch that the edge is pretty well lined up, but at the front it's not quite as good. And then, what's going on here? Oh, shit. It looks like the structure for the belly turret is not very well centered, and it's not because there's nothing in there to help you center it. You just have to, do a good job eyeballing it. And obviously I didn't. And so the facade piece that you put in there when you omit the belly turret is going to obviously probably not fit very good, and it's going to need some work. But that may be the easy thing. As you can see, me moving towards the nose of the aircraft, for some reason now the left and right fuselage halves don't seem to be lining up very well. Continuing on forward, you can see I had a little bit more of a gap to fill, but at least now the left and right bias, hopefully if we can get the camera to stop looking at that opening in the background, the left and right bias is not too bad. So the bottom of the fuselage is okay. Well, reasonably okay. Fixable, not a big deal. And hey, not a lot of people are going to see the bottom, right? Well, they are going to see the top, and that's where things really get stupid. You can see I've already got a little bit of misalignment between left and right going on along the spine of the fuselage. If you look at those protrusions, I don't know what they are, but let's get in real close to one. You can see that's about 30 thousandths out of alignment, and that extends right up there to the panel line. But look, the edge of the opening for the top turret, on the back edge anyway, is perfect. Oh, but look, the front edge, not perfect. Nor is the panel line join as you go along the way. A little bit more of a gap to fill, and oh shit. The opening for the upper navigation window is way out of whack. And fixing that is going to be zero fun. And then you get to the nose, and oh look, the front edge is pretty well aligned in one direction, but then when you tip it over this way, you can see that I've got a lot of filing and filling to do on that joint as it crosses the dashboard. So yeah, I'm pretty annoyed at this point. I don't know how much work I'm going to feel like doing on this thing today. You know, I'd like to keep pressing forward, and I probably will do some, but this is one of those situations where I've got to make a decision about, you know, how much I want to work on it right now, because I'm trying to control my exposure so that I don't run out of mojo. And that's the thing, you know, is when the kit gets frustrating. I mean, look, the dashboard lip right there. Look at how ridiculous that is. How horribly mismatched that edge is. That's just stupid. You know, this is the first point where I've actually started to feel genuinely, you know, kind of pissed off about this kit. I accepted it up front as an adventure, and I'm cool with that, but, you know, there gets to be a point where you're just like, okay, dudes, this is silly, enough is enough. But anyway, it's all good, it's all part of modeling, and I will soldier on. Well, in spite of all of my bitching and moaning yesterday about the finishing work on this fuselage, I did go ahead and tackle it, and things went pretty well. And so I thought I would just go ahead and do one more quick video segment for this episode and talk a little bit about how I did the filling work, because I am using a new filler, and that's this Bondo glazing and spot putty. I've heard, you know, over time, quite a few people talk about how good this stuff is, but I know Gil Mondragon uses it, James Dickerson, Jim D's Models uses it, Doug's Models uses it, and it's just really good stuff. And I am a complete convert from Squadron at this point, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why, but I have to dig the tube of Squadron out of the trash can where I threw it just a little bit ago, because I'm done with this stuff. And here's the main reason why. Okay, look, in 40 years, Squadron has never been able to come up with a lid for this tube that works worth a damn. It's got like 2 threads that get completely clogged up with putty as you use it, and then when the lid won't go on anymore, your tube of putty dries out when it's still half full, and you've wasted a $7 tube of filler putty. And you know, not only is that not a problem with this Bondo, but you get 3 times as much for about the same price. So that's an improvement right there already. But I also really like the way that it performs a lot better. Squadron Green has been my choice when I want to go on to bare plastic because it's got pretty good body, and if you've got a large you know, gap or a big area that you've got to fill and feather out, then it does work okay. But it tends to be kind of porous, and you get pinholes and things like that, and you know, you really need a little bit of a sealer over it before you can put paint on it sometimes. And this Bondo doesn't do that, doesn't have that problem at all. It goes down really nicely. It's I guess the best way to say it is that it's just a little creamier than the Squadron, and so it goes down smooth. What I do is I just cut myself a little piece of styrene sheet to use as a spatula. That works pretty good, and so you can spread it out really thin, and it dries really fast and doesn't shrink a whole lot. And then it wet sands beautifully. You can see here where there are the remnants of the Bondo underneath the black there, and you know, I didn't have to use a whole lot of it. Here on the dashboard, a couple of spots along the top of the fuselage where the stretched sprue that I used didn't quite do the job. So anyway, that was pretty painless, and I definitely recommend this product in your arsenal of tools for doing body work. Now, I like to do this in 2 stages, and I've already done the second stage of this, and that is I go over the joint after I get the filler sanded down, and I paint on a layer of this, which is one of my favorites, which is this All-Clad 309 micro filler primer. Now, I like the black, but it does come in a couple of other colors. The reason that I like the black is because if you still have a gap left over, it shows up really well with the black. And sometimes I'll even just take a Sharpie and, you know, kind of work along the gap, because that will make that, you know, if there's any trace of a seam left, it'll make it kind of almost show up in neon. And that's a little trick that I learned from Gary Bottoms. But by using the black primer, it not only does that, but it also seals in whatever filler I've got underneath and gives me another thin layer of filler that really helps to finish out the, you know, feathering in the joint work and make everything really smooth. Now, if you use it, you'll notice a couple of things. One is that, and hopefully you'll be able to see this, it may look like there's still a bit of a seam there. Now, what's happening is that as the stuff, you know, dries and shrinks, it sinks down into the gap. But that's not something to be too freaked out about. The stuff dries so fast that literally while I'm over here putting it on the bottom side, the stuff on the top side has dried enough that I can then come back and just brush on another layer. And what I've found is that after 2 or 3 layers, it may still look like there's a line there, but I'll come back and sand it, and there's enough of a thickness built up that will go away and everything will look good. The other thing that you may notice if you look real close is that it may appear that the plastic is crazing where you put that microfiller primer, and it is, because it's a lacquer primer and it's pretty hot, and it actually it soaks into the plastic, which is one of the reasons that I like it, because it just, you know, it really sinks in there and gives you a good bond, and it also helps it to feather out really well when you're sanding it. When I'm goodness, that was a bit of a disaster. No harm, no foul. That's why I have a brass nose gear on there, so that it doesn't get snapped off when I do things like that. Anyhow, when I'm sanding it, what I do is I just put a little water right here on the bench, because I'm just crazy like that. and I get myself a UMP 240 grit sanding stick, which is another one of my favorite things. And once I get a good grip on things, I just start dipping the sander in the water and start having a go at it. And you know, it's just like anything, you just got to work at it. And this stuff sands down pretty well, and you can see it starting to come up there. And normally I would probably mask around the joint so that I didn't get onto the panel lines, but I've been able to control this fairly well, and that's one reason that I like this method, because you know, putting that microfiller primer on there with a brush lets me contain it to the area that I want it to be real easily and not worry about screwing up a bunch of stuff that I'll have to fix later. Okay, so I just wipe that off. And that's already looking pretty good. But one thing that I like about using this black primer as my final filler stage is that hopefully you'll be able to see this. If you look right there by the opening of the upper turret, there's still a shiny area there, and there's still a few other places where you can see that. And that's basically just telling you that you've still got a low spot there. So just come back and concentrate on that area a little bit. And just like that, it's, well, not quite feathered out. Still got a little bit of a low spot right there. Okay, that's got it pretty well. Now what I do next is I get this, which is a 240 grit sanding sponge, and just give it a quick knockdown. And that's, I try to go in the opposite direction, and I do it just real light and real quick to you know, make sure that any large scratches are taken out. But not so heavily that I have to, you know, come back later and rescribe. I'm going to have to do some rescribing on this. That's inevitable, but that's just as much because these panel lines don't line up across the joint as anything. You know, that's a disappointment, but hey, it is what it is. Then the last thing that I do is come along with some 4/0 steel wool, which is another one of my favorite things, and just give that a quick rub down. And that is now polished out just as smooth as a baby's butt. You can see there. That's, you know, knocked down nice and flush and feathered in really, really smooth. Okay, so what I do after that, because I want to make sure that it's gonna look as good as I think it does with paint on it. And this is just a lesson that I've learned over the years of doing this, you know, doing body work, is that it may look really good right now, but that first layer of paint may still show some flaws. So what I do next, you can see here on the wings, is I just shoot some primer in those specific areas that I've been working as a last diagnostic. And this is Badger Stynel Res, which is fantastic primer. And you can see that it all looks pretty good. I have a joint going all the way around the edges of this piece right here that represents the supercharger intake. And it's all, you know, nice and smooth. But if you look there at the back of the nacelle, you can see I've got a couple of pinholes that I'm going to need to take care of before I move on to the next step. But anyway, speaking of the wings, I might as well tell you where I'm at with them since I've got one out here. I've worked my way all the way around the joint and gotten myself reasonably satisfied with the way that it looks. I'm not super happy with this. You can see that the edge of the cowl flap piece, it's a terrible fit. It's nice and tight up here, or it was after I did some work on it. Got a huge gap right here, and then at the bottom, almost no gap, which is pretty disappointing, but that's just been the nature of this kit, and that's one that I don't feel like I can really do a whole lot about, so it is what it is, and hey, at least it's on the bottom. The other thing that I did with the nacelles is, you should be able to see this here, I drilled out the vent tubes on the back and replaced those with some stainless and brass tubing. I think looks pretty good. Looks like one of them actually has not stayed glued and gone inside there. I may have to fix that. Anyway, pretty happy with that. I also took care of the landing lights, and they were a real disaster. The first thing I did was line the insides of them with foil, which was something that sounded good when I said it fast, but proved to be a near disaster. Anyway, when I got it done, I guess it looked okay. But then when I went to put the lenses in, they were terrible. They were too thick, so they stuck up proud from the airfoil surface. They didn't have the correct shape, so there were gaps on several sides. And I mean, it was just horrible. And the only thing that I could do was I glued them in with 6-minute epoxy, which I like because it gives you good working time, and it dries crystal clear. So once they were secure, I came back and I filled the gaps with more 6-minute epoxy, and then basically just went through the process of filing them with a flat file to get the shape correct, then sanding it with the 240 grit sanding stick, then hitting it with the sanding sponge, then hitting it with steel wool, and then finally using Novus polish and the buffing wheel on my Proxxon rotary tool to get them buffed out to where they were nice and clear again. So they look good. I mean, I feel like that that was successful, but man, what a hassle. That's just but that's just been kind of the way everything goes with this kit. Okay, so the next stage with the wings, and what I'll hit with the next video episode is I've got a lot of panel line rescribing to do, and after I get done with adding all of the pieces to the fuselage that I have to add, then I've got some panel line rescribing to do on it as well, and that will be the next episode. Okay, so there you go. That is B-25b Adventures Part 4. It's it's been it's, as I said, it's been quite a roller coaster so far, but it's like anything. It depends on how bad you want it, and if you want it bad enough, you just keep grinding away at it until you get where you need to be, and that's what I'm going to continue to do on this project. So hopefully you guys find this interesting, and maybe you're learning some things along the way just like I am. All right, at any rate, if you are still watching, as always, I definitely appreciate it, and I'll see you down the road. Much love.